In a little over 2 weeks, voters will go to the polls in the general election to decide who will represent them in Parliament and who will lead the country. So which of the party leaders has the best plan for the future of the United Kingdom? Tonight I'm joined by the leader of the Conservative Party and the woman who hopes to remain Prime Minister, Theresa May. Prime Minister, you started this campaign with a huge double-digit lead in the polls. It's now down to single digits in some polls. What's gone wrong? So why do you think your lead is narrowing? But could you be in a little bit of trouble now because you were so sure of winning that you thought you could get away with a load of uncosted and half-baked policies? But your policies are uncosted and half-baked, aren't they? Well, let's look at social care for the elderly. 4 days ago, your manifesto rejected a cap on social care costs. Today you announced a cap. That sounds pretty half-baked. Yeah. But you say nothing has changed. Jeremy Hunt, on the day you launched your manifesto last Thursday, the Health Secretary, he said, yes, we are dropping the cap and we're being completely explicit in our manifesto. We're dropping it. We don't think it's fair. Today you announced a cap.
Crucially, the principles.
Prime Minister, your manifesto rejects a cap. It gives a reason why you don't want a cap. Now you're going to have a cap. You need to be honest, I would suggest, and tell the British people you've changed your mind. So Jeremy Corbyn is now rewriting your manifesto.
No, not at all.
Well, that's what it sounds like. You've reacted to him. How can it be honest, Prime Minister, to reject a cap in your manifesto and 4 days later say, we're going to have a cap? What's honest about that? You're just going to change your mind already?
I'm going to.
But when Labour said you're against the cap, they were right until today. You were against the cap.
About those monthly bills for their care. And they'll be able to protect more money than they have been before.
But it's a cap on lifetime social costs, which worry people as well. I mean, this must be the first time in modern history that a party's actually broken a manifesto policy before the election.
All right. Their social care costs.
Now that you're in favour of a cap, can you give us an idea of what the cap might be, that the amount we'll have to pay for social care?
Today is that we will have within that consultation that concept of an absolute limit on the costs that people have to pay. So we're protecting caps.
Why did you not put the consultation on a cap in your manifesto? Instead, your manifesto rejects a cap. You're not
of an ageing
politics
society.
With this, Prime Minister?
No, I'm not.
You came out against a cap. You're now in favour of a cap because of the backlash. That's not paying politics.
No, old and vulnerable people.
Well, you've said that.
What I've done, and that's what I'm going to do.
Let me move on now, because many people have said your manifesto is quite vague when it comes to how you're going to pay for your spending pledges. So let's see if we can get some clarity tonight. How are you going to pay for the extra £8 billion for the NHS?
But that money will go.
The extra money for the NHS.
Into health and social care.
Where will the extra £8 billion come from?
Well, it's the Labour Party who's in the dock when it comes to economic credibility.
No, but the ability to answer this question may be in doubt, Prime Minister. Let me try one more time. Where will the extra £8 billion for the NHS come from? But that's not extra money. That's moving the money around. Yes,
that's what I'm saying. I've identified.
So it's not an extra £8 billion. Well, the Labour Party have given us costings and given us revenues. You can't give me this. Let me ask another way. Well, is it all new money?
The Labour Party have given you costings which actually don't add up.
But at least we can argue about them.
There's a £58 billion black hole in the Labour Party manifesto.
All right.
It's what we've done over the last few years.
Is the £8 billion all new money? The manifesto pledges, quote, the most ambitious programme on investment in buildings and technology the NHS has ever seen. Is that part of the £8 billion?
Day to day.
Where will that money come from?
That in the Naylor report. It's £10 billion.
And where will that come from?
Important
but let me come back to the NHS.
Crucial to this election.
Our hospitals have just endured their worst 12 months in 10 years. A record number of urgent operations were cancelled. A string of targets from emergency care to routine care to cancer care have been missed. What you're promising is too little, too late.
No.
You've ruled out a rise in VAT, but not national insurance or income tax. Why? So national insurance and income tax could go up.
No, I'm very clear that it is our intention to reduce taxes.
But you haven't ruled out rises in these two taxes. Except the tax burden is now the highest for 30 years under your government.
And under my government.
The highest.
Under the
You tried to raise national insurance for the self-employed in the budget a couple of months ago. You were forced to retreat. Can you rule out that you'll try that again?
So national insurance when it comes in, but we've removed the proposals that we put in the budget. We've removed those from the table.
But you could bring them back. I understand.
In those negotiations.
That's the point you've made several times. I want to come on to the just about managing. People who are just about managing. They're not the poorest of the poor, but they're not that affluent either. Life can be a bit of a struggle. You say you're on their side, but inflation is now rising faster than average pay, so living standards are being squeezed, and you've frozen their in-work benefits for almost 7 million people. In what way are you on their side? They're being squeezed in income at the moment. What way are you on their side? You've taken away £280 a year from their in-work benefits because of the freeze. How is that being on their side?
It's building a strong economy.
They'd like their living standards to be rising. You're squeezing them. How many pensioners will lose their winter fuel allowance?
Should be
set. So you don't know, but pensioners watching tonight, they won't know. Not the very rich, they're going to lose, that's clear. The very poor will probably keep it. But the vast in-between, you cannot tell them tonight whether they'll get up to £300 or not this coming winter. But you can't tell them tonight or not whether they're going to get their winter fuel allowance or not. It's a vague promise, uncosted. You don't know.
No, what I've said is that we will means test winter fuel payments.
But I'm asking you where. How will you do it? You have done that before you came up with the policy.
Overall, we will be protecting pensioners.
You've promised twice to reduce immigration to the tens of thousands, and twice you failed. Why should we believe you a third time? But you've always had that power. We haven't had that in. You've always had that power with non-EU migration, and you've never managed to get that down to the tens of thousands. Even the bit you've controlled, you haven't managed to control.
We've seen it come down, and we have seen
it, and
we have seen it go up.
But you're not bringing it down.
It hasn't. Well, the latest
net
figures.
migration is higher now than it was when you came to power in 2010.
And the latest figures did see a fall. But you're right, we haven't got down.
Higher. Doesn't this go to the heart, Prime Minister, of why people have lost trust in politicians? You make promises, you fail to keep them, but you just make the same promise again. The Conservatives promised to end the budget deficit by 2015. It's now going to be 2025 at the earliest. You promised to reduce migration to the tens of thousands. It's still 273,000. On these two big issues, you failed to meet your promises. Why would we trust the Tories on anything else? These are big issues, Prime Minister. Yes, the budget deficit, how we spend and borrow and tax, the immigration, which was a huge issue, as you will know, in the Brexit campaign and so on. On these two major issues, you have failed to keep your promises. George Osborne says not a single senior member of your cabinet supports the immigration target. Is that true?
What we do on the immigration
in your cabinet. You said last week that Britain faces, I quote, dire consequences if we fail to get a good deal in the Brexit talks of leaving the EU. What sort of dire consequences? What will be the dire consequences if we don't get a deal? What will the dire consequences be? I don't understand why no deal can be better than a bad deal, but no deal would also mean dire consequences. And you haven't told us what the consequences would be.
That politician.
But you're now saying that no deal. You're now saying no deal means dire consequences, and I'm trying to find out how dire the consequences will be.
Because
if you win on June the 8th, Prime Minister, if you win, how long will you stay Prime Minister? How long will you stay?
For me to be Prime Minister for the next term.
You'll stay for the next Parliament. Prime Minister, thank you. In less than 2 weeks, voters will go to the polls in the general election to decide who will represent them in Parliament and who will lead the country. So which of the party leaders has the best plan for the future of the United Kingdom? Tonight, I'm talking to the leader of the Labour Party and the man who hopes to be Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn. Mr. Corbyn, today you drew a link between terror attacks at home and British actions abroad. Do you believe if Britain had not followed the foreign policy it has since Tony Blair was in office, the attack on Manchester would not have happened? But was Manchester a consequence of our foreign policy? So
and
nothing
I do not,
to do with foreign policy.
Not.
But I'm struggling to find the role of foreign policy. You see, Islamic State was founded well before the invasion of Iraq. It's murdering people across Europe because it hates our values. Only last year they said this: some might argue that your foreign policies are what drives our hatred. But this particular reason for hating you is secondary. Even if you were to stop bombing us, we would continue to hate you. Our primary reason for hating you will not cease to exist until you embrace Islam. It's not foreign policy.
Totally.
But they're targeting young girls at a pop concert because they hate our values. They said they hate secular liberal societies. It's not foreign policy. Sure,
values.
But where's the foreign policy? I mean, what was the foreign policy of Sweden that resulted in Sweden being attacked?
The foreign coherent form of...
anyway.
Would want to do
you're
that.
the one that raised foreign policy today. What was the foreign policy?
I think
the Yazidi women
Andrew, I think
enslaved and sexually assaulted, killed. The Yazidi women. What was their foreign policy?
Andrew, I am not defending any attacks on women or anybody else. What I'm saying
I'm not accusing you.
Thank you.
You've called for, your phrase was smarter ways today to deal with countries harbouring terrorists. But you wouldn't put boots on the ground. You wouldn't bomb the terrorists. You wouldn't use drones to take out the terrorist leaders. So what would you do? Would you talk to them? That's it. That's the smarter way.
Well, that's a good start for doing it. The other one is to...
Vague. Well, we live in an age of terrorism now, that's clear. And one of the most important responsibilities of being Prime Minister is keeping the British people safe. Why would the British people want as their leader a man who for years supported the IRA? You say you didn't support the IRA, but you invited convicted IRA terrorists to tea in the Commons a few weeks after the Brighton bomb, which tried to destroy our elected government. You stood for a minute's silence to honour, your word, Mr. Corbyn, honour IRA terrorists killed by the British Army. Throughout the 80s and the 90s, you spoke at scores of hardline Republican gatherings which backed the IRA and the armed struggle. You honoured the 8 IRA terrorists that had been killed. That was the purpose of the meeting. But the purpose of the meeting was to honour these terrorists. I mean, as you went to all these hardline Republican meetings, they were backed by the IRA and its apologists. At any time publicly, did you urge them to give up the bomb and the bullet? Did you urge the IRA to stop the bombs and the bullets? All its front people that you did meet all the time.
I obviously, as
an achievement. We certainly recognise Mo Mowlam. It's your role I'm trying to find out. Because the former IRA terrorist leader, Sean O'Callaghan, he says, quote, "You played no part ever at any time in promoting peace in Northern Ireland." He says the peace you sought was a victory for the IRA. But you didn't play any role in that.
My role.
But that doesn't mean you had to speak at over 70 hardline Republican movements. Now, you may not have heard of or dealt with Sean O'Callaghan, but you will have heard and met the highly respected Seamus Mallon. He was one of the architects of the peace process. He was at the heart of it, along with John Hume. Seamus Mallon says, quote, "He never heard anyone mention Corbyn at all in the peace process, that you very clearly took the side of the IRA and that was incompatible with working for peace." Seamus Mallon.
He never said that to me in Parliament.
He said it. Isn't the truth is that you've basically supported the armed struggle for a united Ireland, but now you want to be Prime Minister, you have to distance yourself from it. You see, we look at your record and we can't find evidence of you urging the IRA to put away its guns and bombs. And then we see your shadow chancellor, John MacDonald. He said he honoured those involved in the IRA's armed struggle. That was his word. He backed the bombs and the bullets, his words. Your shadow Home Secretary, Diane Abbott, said an IRA victory against the British state would be a victory for all of us. You've surrounded yourself with like-minded IRA supporters.
John MacDonald apologised for those remarks on Question Time.
Only because they became public.
Well, he apologised for those remarks. The position...
He made them in 2003.
Andrew, the position has to be that we want peace around the world.
But in 2003, the peace process was well underway, and your shadow chancellor said he honoured the IRA's armed struggle. IRA killed 1,800 people.
Yes.
But most people watching tonight, they won't know that you were so close to the hardline Republicans and to the apologists for the IRA. Don't you think they won't just be surprised? They'll be quite appalled by it. If I look at all the IRA atrocities, from the Harrods bomb through to Enniskillen, Lisburn, Omagh, not once is there a record of you condemning that. And every time you voted, 56 times, against giving the security forces more powers. Why would people trust you with our security? If you voted 56 times against toughening up our security capabilities.
Can I finish a moment?
Of course. Let me turn to NATO. It's the military alliance which all previous Labour and Tory governments think has kept this nation and the West safe for more than 7 decades. It was created by a Labour government. But you've called NATO a very dangerous Frankenstein of an organisation, a danger to world peace. 2 years ago, you said it should be wound up. Do you still believe that?
What?
But it was only 3 years ago. You called it a very dangerous Frankenstein and a danger to world peace. Do you still believe that or not? But do you think it's a Frankenstein?
I think all organisations need to be accountable.
So have you changed your views on NATO?
No, what I've done...
So you still think it's a danger to world peace?
Can I finish my sentence, please? Thank you.
It'd be good if you could answer my question. We know the history, Mr. Corbyn. I'm trying to work out if you would be a committed supporter of NATO, as every previous Prime Minister of this country has been.
A committed member.
Let's turn to nuclear weapons, because you're a lifelong campaigner for unilateral nuclear disarmament. So under your leadership, Labour's support for the renewal of the Trident deterrent, it's not credible, is it?
Because of the tragedy of Manchester last week.
Clarify Trident. Do you support the renewal of the Trident deterrent?
It's there in the programme and therefore it's going
So when
ahead.
I asked you, Mr. Corbyn, do you support the renewal of Trident? But can you tell the British people tonight that you support the renewal of Trident?
We're going ahead with the programme which has been agreed by Parliament and voted on by the Labour Party.
Do you support it?
Listen, my views on nuclear weapons are well known. I want to achieve a nuclear-free world through multilateral disarmament, through the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
So you don't support it?
I
understand all that, but we need a simple answer to a simple question.
No,
you cannot say to the British people tonight that I, Jeremy Corbyn, will support the renewal of Trident.
It's there in the programme, it's there in the manifesto.
You can't bring yourself to say it.
And what we of nuclear holocaust? No, we don't.
So why don't you say you're against it? Will the defence review that you want to call if you become Prime Minister, will that include Trident?
It will look at the role of nuclear weapons as it will look at everything.
So you could ditch it right away, couldn't you?
It will look at cybersecurity.
I understand that, but let's just clarify this tonight. You cannot tell the British people that you are in favour of the renewal of Trident, but you do want a defence review, and that will include Trident, and you could get rid of it.
It would include other issues in it. Listen, it's there in the programme. What's going ahead?
Let's turn to domestic policy. Unemployment is now at a 40-year low. We're one of the fastest growing major advanced economies. Companies have flocked to invest in the United Kingdom. But you're now promising a massive spending binge. It's to be funded by more borrowing and huge tax rises on the very businesses and people that have helped to create over 2 million extra jobs. Don't you risk our economic recovery? You say 95% of the country won't pay extra income tax, extra taxes. But the Institute of Fiscal Studies, which is a pretty independent arbitrator of these things at elections, says there is no way that tens of billions of pounds of tax rises would affect only a small group at the very top. No way. They say your plans, quote, would not work.
No, they haven't said in terms they will not work. What
they've said they would not work, Mr. Corbyn. They said that you cannot bring.
The prize worth
they said that you're going for the highest ever peacetime level of taxation. The highest ever. No, they're talking about the overall level of taxation would be the highest ever in peacetime under a Corbyn government. And part of the investing in the future, you plan to borrow a lot to do that. How much will you borrow? What's a bond?
A government bond.
Which it's a debt instrument. It's borrowing.
It's a bond.
But you would still have to borrow. Bonds are borrowing. You would borrow.
And in some cases, very bad levels of pollution.
I understand the case, but you would need to borrow to buy the utilities.
No, it's not. It's a swap of the shares for a government bond.
But if you're issuing bonds, Mr. Corbyn, you're issuing government debt. You are borrowing.
Issuing bonds that we own, which would be paid for by the profits from the industry.
But you said
you
said you would cut the water utilities profits. That means you wouldn't have the money to pay for the bonds.
Instead of the profits being siphoned off.
National debt's already an incredible 1.7 trillion. If you borrow to invest, on top of the 50 we do, another 25 you say, you need to borrow to nationalise. You may have to borrow if the IFS is right for day-to-day spending.
No, we're absolutely clear we will not borrow for day-to-day spending.
But you might have to if the IFS is right. Our national debt, which has already soared under the current government, would soar even more under Labour, wouldn't it? For people watching tonight who want the government, they're looking for the government to reduce immigration numbers. Labour's not the party, and you're not the leader to deliver that, are you?
The country as a whole.
Would you try to cut the numbers? Mr. Corbyn, many voters in this election, it'll be the first time they've had a chance to look at you as a potential Prime Minister. You've been a backbencher for most of your life, never a government minister.
It's an honourable position.
Indeed it is. So how should people judge you? Should they listen to those who would know you best, your own MPs? Because your own backbenchers, John Woodcock, a Labour MP, says, I will not countenance ever voting to make Jeremy Corbyn Britain's Prime Minister. Neil Coyle, a Labour MP, says the reason why lifelong Labour voters aren't backing us is Jeremy Corbyn. Alan Johnson, former Labour Home Secretary, says you're useless, incompetent and incapable. That's the people that know you.
And I invite everyone to have a look at the policies,
of course,
and decide what they are.
And they will, and the policies are there, but the people and the leader matters as well. And what I'm trying to say is, should the people who don't know you listen to those who do and follow these judgments?
And I say
so
to them...
So people want all these things. I've just got one final question for you on this.
Listen, I've spent my life in politics, but trying to get social justice for everybody.
Of course you have.
And I relish the opportunity of doing the same in government.
And of course you do, but why should the voters trust you when so many, even of your own MPs, don't trust you?
You could have quite easily got quotes from a number of people who would say positive things.
Now you not nearly as many.
You chose not. You chose
180
not to
had no confidence in you.
You chose not to do that.
And it will be the choice of the people on June the 8th. Jeremy Corbyn, thank you.